Ven-Allen Lubin is in the transfer portal, but he's coming back, right?
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Carolina content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you so much for making this your first listener watch of the day to get your Wednesday going the right way. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and of course, our great insiders. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's a great deal. Joining me on the show today, we were just talking about it happens far too infrequently, and we need to make it happen more regularly, is our guy Michael Koh from WCHL. It's great to be together. We're coming off of football and all the craziness of basketball. And so, Michael, my man, I hope you have been getting some sleep. It's great to have you on. So glad you're here. So here's where we're headed today, folks. Going to be a lot of great conversation because there's all sorts of storylines going on right now. First, we're going to talk about some of the Ven-Allen Lubin business, like what on earth is going on there. I want to get Koh's take on that. Also, we know a little bit of something about all 11 of Carolina's non-con games already for next season. That's great. And there's obviously all sorts of stuff happening in football right now, so we'll get to all of that. Keep in mind, the transfer portal closed last night at 11:59 p.m., so anybody not in the portal cannot go in the portal, but no one, like anybody that's already in, they don't have to commit yet. So that's where we're at. That's what we're keeping our eyes on. Koh, my man, great to have you. Here's where we're going to start. Ven-Allen Lubin, I talked a little bit about it on yesterday's show, but I'd really love to get your take on this because I'm sure you've been rolling it around and thinking on it a good bit here. Let me just set the stage. Ven-Allen Lubin on Monday enters the transfer portal, but basically so that he can protect himself, provide himself some flexibility with all intentions of coming back to Carolina. Here's how I'll start it, and here's how I'll ask you. Ultimately, do you think Ven-Allen Lubin is a member of the 25-26 Tar Heels?
Yeah, I would lean toward yes, just because, think about it this way. Lubin, if he does end up at a different school for his senior year, that would be his fourth school in 4 years. That's a lot of new cultures to get adjusted to, a lot of new cities to get adjusted to. That's just a lot for a young man his age to have to deal with. So he might just be sick of transferring away from schools, and maybe this, as you said, the portal thing is a way to negotiate, a new NIL contract with North Carolina. And with the House settlement, the North Carolina will be able to directly negotiate with Ven-Allen Lubin instead of having to go through third parties. So there's all of that you have to worry about. And just thinking about, who Ven-Allen is, he's a smart guy. He was at Notre Dame and Vanderbilt before coming to Carolina. Academics are important to him. He seems like a very grounded young man in the times that we've talked to him. He's not, he's not super active on social media. He's a pretty quiet guy, except when he's on the court, then he's yelling and screaming a lot. But just to reference what he said about this full intent of coming back to Carolina, that was his first tweet. He tweeted that out, and that was his first tweet since last June. Right. And that was right after he came to Chapel Hill. So if he took the time to, put that all on his social media, you have to think, well, he probably means it. And you look at the personnel that Carolina brought in. Yes, they do bring in three big guys who, if you look at the recruiting and the stars, then they are probably higher rated than Ven-Allen Lubin was and is. Henry Vasar, Jaron Stevenson, Caleb Wilson, all guys who might be more physically gifted than Ven-Allen Lubin, but they don't have one thing, and that is experience as a Tar Heel. We have seen Ven-Allen Lubin play well as a Tar Heel and play well against really good competition. He had 20 and 10 against Kaman Malawach, who's going to be in the NBA next year in the ACC tournament. So we know what he can bring. He really came on strong. I mean, you look at his season-long stats, 8.7 points, 5.5 rebounds. He was the team leader in rebounds. Those are fine for a reserve, but you look at his final 11 games of the season when he was fully entrenched as a starter over Jae'lyn Washington, 13.6 points, 7.2 rebounds, shooting 67% from the floor, 84% from the free throw line. That's all ACC caliber numbers. Now, you can't count on him being that hot to begin the season next season, but if he were a part of UNC's front court, I think they'd be way better off because he brings some toughness, sort of an edge with the way he plays. He's really physical, which is something that UNC was in desperate need of, especially on the low blocks last season. And he plays above his size. Hubert Davis is so fond of saying that rebounding is not about, the length of your arms or the size of your body. It's about the size of your heart, right? He loves to say that. And then he brings in a 7-footer from Estonia. But Ven-Allen Lubin sort of typifies what I think Hubert Davis loves to see from a rebounder. He would have been Roy Williams would have loved Ven-Allen Lubin. I mean, Roy Williams is not dead, but would have loved coaching Ven-Allen Lubin. So he's definitely a throwback style player. And if I were a betting man, I don't bet on sports because I'm not stupid. But if I were a betting man, I would carefully wager money on Ven-Allen coming back. Obviously he's in the portal, so he is entirely within his rights to leave. Other schools are entirely within their rights to negotiate with him and to contact him because, there are a lot of schools that would love a player like Ven-Allen Lubin. They were watching the same games we were. So it's definitely a fluid situation, and it's really a nice sort of summary of where we are in college sports. I'm in the portal, but I'm not actually leaving. And here's what I have to say about it. No one actually knows what it really means, but it is not unprecedented for a Tar Heel to enter the portal and then come back to school. It's what Seth Trimble did last season, not exactly for the same reasons, but he was not in the portal for very long. So we'll see what happens with Ven-Allen here in the next few days, few weeks.
Yes, several things there, Michael. I love that you made the point that he was Carolina's leading rebounder. Because with Seth Trimble being the leading rebounder for so long, I think people assume that Seth finished the season as Carolina's leading rebounder in terms of average. It actually ended up being Ven-Allen Lubin. Another point is, you said Ven-Allen is well within his rights to move on, being in the portal, and other schools are well within their rights to reach out to him. And then there's the messiness of Carolina is well within their rights to kind of cover their behinds,
right,
and go after others. There's been a lot of Andre Stojakovic rumors, which obviously isn't a 1-for-1 replacement, but I think Carolina isn't going to want to get caught with their pants down on this thing either. And so they're doing all their due diligence to make sure, like, hey, we would love to have Ben back, but if not, we want to make sure we're okay. Koh, here's what I want to ask you next. Let's go back to last offseason. Mm-hmm. And I really felt, I was like, man, I love Ven-Allen Lubin, ellipsis, as Carolina's backup 5. Right? And unfortunately, I mean, I guess he kind of did start that way because Jae'lyn was starting at the 5. But really, he shouldn't have been, right? Like, it's just Jae'lyn didn't pan out. It should have been able to get a Henry Vesar type player. Would you imagine, like, because where I sit here and feel it's like, boy, I love the scope of the front court. If Ven-Allen's back, you got Vesar, assuming he starts at the 5, with Ven-Allen backing him up as a different type of a big, with then both, as you mentioned, Caleb Wilson and Jaron Stevenson fighting it out for the 4, which I think is going to be a great positional battle heading into next year. Is that kind of how you see the front court shaking out if Ven-Allen is back?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you don't get a guy like Vesar and I assume pay handsomely a guy like Vesar for nothing, right? He has the gifts. I mean, Arizona was telling him that, you could be Big 12 player of the year, and he has the traits of a future NBA player because he has the 3-ball in his game. He has a little more physicality than a guy like Jae'lyn played with. So yeah, I think going into next season, if Ven-Allen Lubin is in the fold, you do see Vesar still starting at the 5. I wouldn't discount James Brown because all arrows are pointing toward him being back. And he was a talented guy in spurts for Carolina. He'll be one offseason better by the time September and October roll around. So I do think if Lubin leaves, I think Carolina is still well filled out in the front court because you've got, 2 excellent 4s, you would think, in Jaron Stevenson and Caleb Wilson. You've got a rock solid 5 in Vesar, and you've got a prospect in James Brown who has some potential. So I still think that, obviously you would like Lubin to stay, but I don't think, they're cooked if he does leave. It would be a bad look. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. And if that's the case, and obviously we're still waiting on Drake Powell's decision, which the NBA early entry deadline is Saturday night, folks, at 11:59 Eastern. So that's fresh, hot on the heels of the portal deadline that again happened last night. And so we'll start to learn a little bit more here in the next coming days, and we'll continue to have questions or conversations, about the shape of the front court. But Koh, I love your point that you made about Ven-Allen. What he's done here is really the shape of the landscape of college athletics right now. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, is that we're just seeing new things happen day after day after day. That's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. And I see why you're doing that. Now, Carolina's front court, whatever shape it's going to be in, is going to play a much easier non-conference schedule next year, it appears. We're going to unpack what we know about the non-conference schedule coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, well, where did all my money go? Like between dining out, between online shopping, entertainment, whatever it is, it's easy to lose track of it all. Or we're getting ready for summer and you're planning your vacations. You got a budget and you're like, I got to have this money all lined up. Well, great news. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over all your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So you stop managing your money and you actually start building wealth instead. So instead of having to juggle all these different apps out there, you can just use Monarch Money as one-stop shopping to check your finances, to track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. My wife and I, we always want to make sure we're on the same page when it comes to finances. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, managing that money with my wife is smoother than ever before. I can track shared accounts, personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page with my wife without all that stress. So join us. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check it out. It may be the off season, but it is never too early to start looking ahead at next year's schedule. And while the ACC might wait till approximately mid-November to give us the ACC schedule, we have put together Carolina's non-con schedule already for next year. You might recall last year, folks, they played 12 non-con games. That was because a game played at Hawaii does not count against your 31 total regular season games. But this year, Carolina will revert to 11. And already here on Wednesday, April 23rd, we know at least something about all 11 of Carolina's non-con games. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see the chart that Koh and I have pulled up here. If you're listening to this, don't do it while you're driving or whatever you're doing, but you can pull it up. I've got this posted on my Twitter feed as well, and you can see it there. But Koh, lots of takeaways here, but I think the biggest thing in totality when you look at this is this non-con schedule looks wildly different than Carolina's gauntlet from last season.
Yeah, you can just say it's easier. You can just say that we're not beholden to the university or anything. But yeah, no, I won't say it's like an overcorrection from last season when they just got brutalized in the non-conference, but it's certainly softer. There are still some marquee games in there. Kansas coming to the Dean Dome will be big. Michigan State and Fort Myers will be big. The SEC Challenge, they're probably going to draw someone pretty big in that one. Obviously, Ohio State and the CBS Sports Classic. But there's a lot of question marks as far as the marquee games. For the sake of Carolina's net ranking, you certainly hope that Kansas is better than they were last year. You certainly hope that Ohio State is a lot better than they were last year. And you hope that the Fort Myers tip-off can pull another good team for Carolina to play in that first game ahead of Michigan State. You also hope Michigan State can stay on their level that they were at last year. Because with the Fort Myers thing, that first game on the 25th is really interesting because I could see the tournament organizers not wanting to bring in another big team. So it could be like, a mid-major from the Atlantic 10 or something like that, which would not be great for Carolina because, they need all the big non-conference opponents that they could get, especially if Ohio State is not great. So there are some question marks still to come. And of course, we hope the ACC will be a lot better than it was last season, which is not saying much. And the first ACC game would slot in between Michigan State and USC Upstate if
That's right.
all of and the SEC Challenge if last year's precedent holds.
Right.
So again, there's some question marks, but it's starting to come together for sure. And as you said, it's a lot softer, and there are a lot more home games. That's for sure.
To your point about Fort Myers, I'm just looking back at last year's quartet. It was Michigan, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, and Xavier. So I got to imagine that you're onto something there, because I think both Carolina and Michigan State are more headliney than any of the other. I mean, Michigan's right there, I guess, and Xavier got really good down the stretch. But I got to imagine, yes, that the other two teams will not be as marquee programs as Carolina and Michigan State. So, what you're looking for there, folks, is teams that are hopefully top 50-ish, because that is a neutral site, and that would make it a quad one opportunity. So that's fingers crossed on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's levels to it. I mean, you'd hope for maybe a team like Creighton or something like that, as opposed to Florida Gulf Coast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And so we know dates of all of 10 of these 11 games. The one we don't know is the one that was announced on Tuesday. John Rothstein tweeting out that Carolina will host NC Central. We just don't have the date yet on that one. Outside of that, we have all the dates. As Koh just said, we expect that if precedent holds, between the ACCSEC Challenge game, which we expect, again, based on precedent, to be Tuesday or Wednesday, December 2nd or 3rd, and then USC Upstate on Saturday the 13th. I would imagine that Carolina plays a conference game that weekend. What would that be? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like the 6th or the 7th, then have finals break and then be off. So, Koh, as you look at this, this will be the third year of that ACC-SEC Challenge. Carolina been home each of the first 2 years, hosting Tennessee, beating the doors off them. Man, that first half against those Dalton Connect Vols was crazy. And
the best half of the Hubert Davis era by far.
Great point, dude. That is a great call. I would love to go back and think, make a list this summer at some point, best halves of the Hubert Davis era. That's got to be number one.
Second half at Duke in 2022 is in the top 5 for sure.
Iron 5, baby. Oh, that might be a fun. Maybe we should do that show this offseason at some point.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, let's get it down.
I'm rolling on that now. Then last year hosted Bama. That did not go as well. So, Koh, what are your expectations for Carolina in the ACC-SEC Challenge this year?
Yeah, as you said, they'll draw a marquee game because it's ESPN who runs this thing, and ESPN loves the Tar Heels. You look at some of the other teams. Obviously, the SEC is a lot more top heavy than the ACC is. But we were talking about some unofficial predictions. I would not be surprised at all if Duke gets paired up with Florida, because you have 2 Final Four teams. The ACC's best against the reigning national champions. I would not be surprised if that's in Gainesville as well, because Duke hosted Auburn in last year's ACC-SEC Challenge. And, you and I were talking about my prediction for who Carolina would play. If precedent holds with the CBS Sports Classic and they're sticking with Ohio State, then I would not be surprised. And frankly, I kind of want to see this. Carolina go to Lexington and visiting Mark Pope's Kentucky Wildcats, because everybody loves a UNC Kentucky game. And that, Carolina has not played in Rupp for over a decade. That home and home series has gone away because of the CBS Sports Classic. But man, oh man, I will not say no to that matchup at all.
That would be very, very sexy. I would love it. Yes, to Koh's point, it's been since 2014 since Carolina played in Lexington, and so would love to see that happen. Other potentials could be maybe go to Auburn, maybe Arkansas, like the Carolina against Coach Cal would be interesting. Outside of that,
going to Alabama, maybe. I mean, they played every year for the past 4 years. Why not make it?
just make Jaron Stevenson just a
linchpin of this match. I didn't even think about that.
Koh, another factor in the schedule is last year, of Carolina's 12 non-con games, just 5 of them were at home. Mm-hmm. This year, of the 11, 7 of them are at home. Yeah. Last year, it was of the 12 games, 5 of them were bye games, and that I'm even including Hawaii in that, which you might not count since that's a true road game. This year, 6 of the 11 are bye games. Central Arkansas, Radford, Navy, USC Upstate, ECU, and NC Central. There's been a lot of talk about teams kind of being very net friendly with their schedules. Like, hey, the Big 12 was talked a lot about this 2 seasons ago of like, hey, they just played pansies in the non-con, but just beat up on them so that their efficiency margins were massive and the net then loves them. But ahead of a gauntlet of a Big 12 schedule, we don't know if that will work for Carolina because will the ACC be back? I think that's probably the big question for me. Koh, what are your thoughts with that conversation?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I mean, there's merits to both. If you're, playing an absolutely buzzsaw non-conference schedule, then you're preparing yourself for the tournament. You're playing a lot of great teams. And if you win, say, half of those games, then your net is going to be awesome going into conference play. That's what we saw for Carolina 2 years ago when they got some great wins. But then, on the other side of it, if you just schedule cupcakes, and I'll use an example from women's basketball, 3 years ago when LSU won the national championship, they played an absolutely cupcake-filled non-conference schedule. They were undefeated going into conference play, eventually lost to South Carolina, but their net was so high that they got a high seed in the NCAA tournament anyway, ended up winning the national championship. So, there are benefits to it. Obviously, if you're playing more bye games, you're probably going to be resting more guys. That's going to be better for your physical health down the line. We have seen several Tar Heel teams in the past just break down, the tires fall off the bus before the finish line. So there are merits to it. I think the interesting thing, Isaac, is that I think this kind of schedule would have been perfect for last year's Carolina team, because last year's Carolina team had a lot of departures, had a lot of new parts that they had to, fiddle with. They had a lot of lineup shuffling, and those are things that you can do against the Central Arkansas and the Navies and the USC upstates of the world. Those are not the things that you can do when you're playing Auburn and Maui, right? So it's just sort of a different way of attacking things. I certainly think Carolina has the pieces to have a very good record going into conference play next season.
And they have the record to have a very good record heading into the schedule to have a very good record heading into conference play as well. Yeah, and it's just so weird. I mean, Coach Davis has hinted at this, but first time in a long time that Carolina will not play in a 3-game multi-team event, MTE, which is where a lot of teams are headed, right? And so that's going to be interesting. This will obviously be the second year of the home and home with Kansas, which is something a lot of teams are moving to as well. I'm really curious to see if Carolina will sign another home and home with a high profile program, whether that's running it back with Kansas or maybe some other blue blood. I would be very much in favor of that continuation happening.
I certainly think they will, whether it's someone like Michigan State or Arizona. I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, man, that would be great. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. Can't wait for the Jayhawks to come to the Dean Dome. That'll be a lot of excitement. Now, speaking of Carolina not heading off to an exotic location, the football team sure is. They're going to be heading off to Ireland to kick off the 2026 season. I'm going to ask Koh if we can get a little Irish jig from him here coming up in just a second. Carolina TCU kicking off the football season this year. It'll be in the friendly confines of Kenan Stadium. And then Michael Koh in 2026, instead of heading over to Fort Worth, home of Dickies Arena, a great place where we saw Carolina beat the defending national champion Baylor Bears a couple years ago, P.S. The two teams will instead be heading off to Dublin, Ireland, like we saw Georgia Tech and FSU do at the beginning of realizing how terrible FSU was last year. Michael Koh, the first question I got to ask you with this stinks for TCU, right? Who should have had this as a home game, and now they lose out on that. I mean, obviously super fun to fly across the ocean and play, but still, that's a tough thing for the Horned Frogs.
Yeah, it is. Definitely unfortunate for season ticket holders for TCU who are now losing out on a home game, right? UNC is recouping the costs to TCU for, the lost tickets, lost concessions, everything. That's what Inside Carolina is reporting. So this is, a deal that was agreed upon by both schools. UNC wouldn't just forcibly relocate TCU to Ireland just because they feel like it. So this is something that both schools had to agree on. So that TCU is going to make that money back, but not sure that makes a lot of difference to the fans in Fort Worth who may not have the means to just jet off to Ireland on Labor Day weekend. It is a weird situation. When I saw the report, I initially thought they meant this year's UNC TCU games. I was like, oh wow, I got to make travel arrangements in a hurry. But no, it's August 2026. And it'll certainly be a good opportunity for Carolina to stretch its legs on the international stage. It's the first time ever that UNC football will play a game outside the borders of the United States. So that is history in itself.
Man, that's big time. Yeah, I mean, we saw what a grand stage that was last year for the Noles and Georgia Tech, and excited for Carolina to be part of that. I mean, I think who knows if this would have happened if not for the Bill Belichick effect.
It would not have. I can tell you that much.
I love that. Good. I love you definitively saying that, because I was going to speculate that. And yeah. I just think we see that continuing to be a thing. The big question is going to be, is that big Bill Belichick effect, that's a tough phrase, going to translate to W's on the field? And we have no way of knowing that yet.
Yeah, we have no way of knowing. There's so much up in the air with the transfer portal. Like, to your point, when I posted the article on Chapelboro about this game, I initially used a photo of Amare Campbell as the featured photo for the story. And then later that day, Amare Campbell enters the transfer portal. So that's just a nice little snapshot of what it's like to report on college football now. So yeah, it's it's to be determined how good Carolina will look in the Bill Belichick era. You certainly hope, for the sake of the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, that they are not as bad as Florida State turned out to be last season. But like you said, it's a showcase game, and Carolina will want to put its best foot forward. Bill Belichick is going to be a big draw. So it's a great opportunity for Carolina. It'll be on national television against a pretty good team in TCU, who's been in the college football playoff, played in a lot and we could say all this for the game in Keenan Stadium this coming September as well. So
standalone game and all that.
Yeah, it's just, UNC football betting on itself, betting on itself in the Bill Belichick era. And boy, oh boy, are they making a lot of big bets right now.
Which is very interesting. You just mentioned Amare Campbell, obviously Beau Atkinson out the door. That was a tough blow on Tuesday evening, I guess it was. That On3 is predicting Beau to head off to Ohio State, which seems to make a lot of sense, unfortunately. Yeah, wow, couldn't believe that. But, this defense that seemed like it had some intriguing parts sticking around with some others coming in has lost a couple key pieces to it, Koh. And I don't know, this defense, what are you making of it right now?
I don't know. It's tough to tell because I wish I knew which players were doing what during the practice like a pro, but we didn't. I mean, obviously they got some talented transfers in, guys like Kamori House from Washington, a lot of other guys from Washington. They've been hosting some transfers, particularly a linebacker from Boise State, who is looking like a good player. So they're not lacking for talent. I just think that there's so much up in the air right now, and you're losing your two best players who are rock solid starters off of a defense which wasn't that good to begin with. It's worrisome if you think back to the James Madison game. It's looking like it seems like it would not be out of the realm of possibility for TCU to come in and do that to the Tar Heels in Keenan in week 1. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. And flipping to the other side of the ball, JJ Jones has been out trying to get an extra year of eligibility. He and some Duke players going through this as well. That initial preliminary injunction was denied on Tuesday. Unfortunate news for JJ. He actually took to Twitter to say, unfortunately, the preliminary injunction was denied. And while I'm disappointed with the result, my NCAA waiver is still pending. The timing of this is especially unfortunate, being the class that came in the year right after COVID and the last class before the supposed 5-year rule the NCAA will implement. Still, with the NFL draft just a few days away, I'm locked in and focused on the opportunity ahead. Blessed to be in this position and thankful for all the support along the way. The timing of this, man, is so tough. As JJ said, literally, as this show comes out, the draft is tomorrow. People are going to be trying to figure out, who am I going to sign? Where am I going to go? While this news could have allowed him to know, hey, I'm going to be ready to go in Keenan this year. And that's not the case. I mean, this is a tough blow. And it's just, again, we talked about the landscape of college athletics. What do you do if you're JJ in this situation, Koh?
You got to cover all your bases, and you've got to at least prepare as if you're getting drafted, right? I mean, I wouldn't. You never want to give the NCAA the benefit of the doubt for making a sensible decision, right? So I would, if I were him, I would, prepare as if I'm going to be picked in the NFL draft over the next few days. JJ's a smart guy. He's a journalism school graduate. All UNCJ school graduates are brilliant, if I say so myself. So he'll have a lot of options. He worked a little bit at the student broadcasting program at UNC. So there are a lot of things that he can do that don't necessarily involve playing football. So he'll land on his feet whatever he does. But it is a tough blow for him with that preliminary injunction.
Yeah, we'll see. Hoping the best for JJ, and we'll keep our eyes on what happened. Koh, very last question for you. We'll stay with the NFL draft. Omarion Hampton going 1 through 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 32, or outside the first round.
I'll say 21 through 32. I think Genty is the consensus number one running back off the board. I still think the NFL teams are a little hesitant to draft a running back super high. I mean, it worked with Saquon, just not for the Giants, right? The Giants took a chance with Saquon. He was great for them, but he was hurt, and then he goes and wins a Super Bowl for their division rival, right? Completely burns them. There's not Genty's great, but he's not like a generational running back prospect like someone like Saquon was or Adrian Peterson. So I think Omarion will go in the first round. He had a great combine. He's tested great in all the physicality drills. It seems like his interviews have gone well. So yeah, I think he'll go in the first round. There are a lot of teams that I don't want him to go to just because they are poorly run organizations. The Giants, the Raiders, the Jaguars. Please stay away from Omarion Hampton. Now, if he was to go to somewhere like the Commanders or the Cowboys or the Broncos, then okay. I could see him fitting in there. So, yeah, I think he'll go late in the first round.
All right, we'll keep our eyes on what happens, hopefully on Thursday night and not later in the weekend for Omarion. Y'all, big thanks to our guy, Michael Koh, WCHL, for joining us. Please make sure you go check out all his great work there on their website. You can follow along with him on Blue Sky and Twitter and all the great social media sites. Just always has great nuggets for you. I love following him and just staying interacted there as well. My brother, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being with us. Just great to spend some time chatting about all sorts of Carolina athletics going on right now.
Sure, Isaac. Thanks for having me on.
Always. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube, make sure you do that right now so you don't miss a second of Locked On Tar Heels. If you've not joined our Discord, we'd love to have you in there. That link is in the show notes. A group of over 500 Carolina fans just hanging out, talking Carolina athletics and just random life stuff all day long. If you want to go even deeper with the show, join the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders, where you can have one-on-one conversations with me. You get access to all of my charts and stats and data and record books, things like that conference schedule for Carolina's basketball schedule for next year that I've pieced together. All of that is in there and so much more. We're dropping portal rumors in there as well. Love to have you. You guys, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again on tomorrow's show, but until then, peace.